Hi there, thanks for joining me today. My name is Emma Freeman, and today I'll be presenting an ethical case analysis of United Healthcare's use of artificial intelligence to deny rehabilitation claims. This case explores the ethical challenges of AI in healthcare and how we can respond through principled decision making. Okay, so starting with an agenda here, I wanted to give a brief overview of what I will cover. We'll begin with the case summary, followed by an examination of the central ethical issue and stakeholders. Then we'll dive into the analysis using utilitarianism and deontology. From there, I'll propose a corrective course of action using the four-way method, justify the decision, and offer key recommendations. Finally, I'll conclude with a summary of our key takeaways. Okay, so to give kind of a case overview here of what happened, in 2023, there was some investigative reports that revealed that United Healthcare was using AI algorithms to automate the denial of rehabilitation care claims. These denials often contradicted physician recommendations and left patients without medically necessary treatment. The system reportedly approved only a fraction of claims, and appeals were rarely successful. This raised serious concerns about fairness and patient harm. Some of the key points was that the algorithm denied 90% of the rehabilitation service claims, and of course this came with huge ethical concerns, and the denials were disproportionately spread on the elderly and the minorities. Okay, so what is the ethical issues here? The biggest and central ethical issue in this case is whether it is morally justifiable for a health insurance company to use these AI algorithms to make or influence life-impacting or life-altering medical coverage decisions, especially when it results in systematic denial of care. This raises a lot of questions about transparency, autonomy, fairness, and human dignity. Okay, so now that we have an idea of what happened here, I wanted to identify the key stakeholders in this situation. The ones that were directly impacted were firstly the patients who were denied or may be denied critical care, the providers whose medical judgment was overridden, United Healthcare, whose interests lie in cost reduction, and then the regulators and the policymakers who are tasked with enforcing patient protection. Each one of these holds varying degrees of power and influence, but at the end, patients are the ones that are disproportionately vulnerable in this dynamic. Okay, so I wanted to go over one of the first ethical perspectives, and that would be utilitarianism. Those with utilitarianism perspectives focus on maximizing overall well-being, or more famously, to maximize the greatest good for the greatest number. They also focus on balancing cost savings with patient harm and is considered ethical if the benefits outweigh the harm. For this particular scenario, United Healthcare's system falls short. While cost savings might benefit shareholders or the organization as a whole, the harm to the individual patients, especially those that were denied care, outweighs the benefits. The pain, suffering, and the decline in the health outcomes create a pretty negative net utility. Okay, for our second ethical perspective, it's going to focus on deontology. They focus on moral duties and patient rights. They have respect for fairness and transparency, and automated denials might violate ethical duties. So under this lens, denying care based on algorithmic predictions violates the moral duty to treat patients fairly and respect their rights. It also disrespects the provider's role and the duty of informed decision making. Regardless of outcomes, denying care without human evaluation is inherently wrong. Okay, so for the corrective action plan, I wanted to include implementing a required human review for all AI-driven denials, establishing an independent appeals board that includes clinical experts, providing patients with transparent communication regarding how denial decisions are made. When you use all of these different actions, they help to restore ethical accountability while preserving the useful aspects of AI for more administrative efficiency. Okay, my chosen method was the four-way method. And how we apply this is through truth, consequences, fairness, and character. And how you use this framework is like this. So for truth, the AI-based decisions must be transparently explained to patients. So the patients have to understand why or why not they were approved or denied for their claims. The consequences is that the current system harms more than it helps. The corrective action would reduce harm and increase trust. For fairness, the denials should be reviewed equitably, not algorithmically. And for character, an ethical organization would show compassion and integrity, not just cost efficiency. When you use this framework, it's clear that reform is not only possible, but ethically necessary. I also wrote down a couple of questions here to just kind of think about, and that is, what is the ethical problem? Who are the stakeholders? What are the options? And what is the ethically correct decision? I also wanted to point out the graphic I chose. I thought that it was very insightful on each of the four methods here. If you look closely, like you can even pause the video here, every single section has a lot of really, really helpful questions, like will the proposed solution be implemented in a way that helps build trusting relationships, or does the proposed solution treat people the way you would want to be treated? So I feel like this particular graphic is really, really helpful when it comes to using this four-way method. In this first part of applying the four-way method, we're going to identify the ethical problem and the key stakeholders involved. The core issue is that AI-driven denials are limiting access to medically necessary care, often without proper review. This practice restricts patient access to vital rehabilitation services and raises concerns of fairness and transparency. The primary stakeholders impacted in this include the patients who are experiencing early discharge and denial of care, the providers who are unable to deliver the care they prescribe, insurance companies who aim to manage costs but they risk ethical and legal fallout, and the regulators who must ensure that care decisions follow both ethical and legal standards. Next, we are going to evaluate our options using the four-way method. Option 1 is to continue AI-only denials, which increases efficiency but has already led to harm and lawsuits. Option 2 is to require mandatory human review alongside AI, ensuring that every denial is checked by a qualified clinician for appropriateness and fairness. And lastly, for option 3, it involves improving transparency by making AI processes more understandable and adding stronger appeals procedures for patients and the providers. By using the four-way method, we're considering not just the outcomes, but whether these options align with the truth, fairness, and ethical leadership that we're looking for. The latter two options, adding the human review and improving transparency, will be stronger and better reflecting ethical duties, and they would also help to mitigate patient harm. Okay, lastly, for part 3, based on this ethical evaluation, the most responsible corrective action is to combine the efficiency of AI with mandatory human oversight. This dual system protects patients by ensuring that complex medical decisions aren't left solely to algorithms. We also recommend increasing transparency because patients and providers must be clearly informed when AI is involved in coverage decisions and understand how those decisions are made. Lastly, a strengthened appeals process is essential to allow patients a timely and fair way to contest denials. These combined changes reflect honesty, fairness, and responsibility, all values that should guide ethical healthcare leadership. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and justify these different ethical perspectives. So starting with a utilitarian perspective, the corrective actions proposed, like adding human oversight and improving transparency, maximize the overall benefit while reducing harm. When you incorporate human review, we can prevent unjust denials and improve health outcomes for patients. At the same time, AI still contributes efficiency to the system, allowing for timely processing of claims. This balance helps to improve the well-being of the majority while also preserving operational benefits. The approach aligns with the utilitarian ethics because it promotes the greatest good for the greatest number. Patients receive the care they need, providers regain the trust in the system, and insurers still benefit from improved accuracy and risk mitigation. Okay, so moving on to deontology. From a deontological lens, this corrective decision fulfills moral duties that extend beyond outcomes. It recognizes that organizations have a responsibility to treat patients with respect and fairness regardless of financial pressures. Human oversight ensures that no decision is made without ethical consideration and proper justification. Transparency allows patients to understand decisions that affect their health and appeal them if necessary, upholding their autonomy. These actions adhere to ethical principles such as honesty, justice, and respect for people, making this the morally correct course of action, even if it is more resource intensive. Okay, so next we'll be going over recommendations, and the first recommendation is to integrate mandatory human clinical review into the denial process. Under this model, every AI-generated denial must be reviewed and validated by a licensed healthcare professional before it's finalized. This change ensures that each case is assessed for clinical appropriateness, recognizing the nuance and variability in patient needs that AI alone may overlook. It significantly lowers the risk of inappropriate or unjust denials, which can delay necessary care. Ethically, this supports deontological principles by upholding patients' rights to fair and respectful treatment. At the same time, it enhances outcomes and minimizes harm, aligning with utilitarian aims to maximize benefit. In essence, it restores a human safeguard in a process that should never be fully automated. Okay, so moving on to recommendation 2, that is all about enhancing transparency in denial processes. Insurers need to provide clear, patient-friendly explanations when coverage is denied, outlining the specific criteria used by the AI and detailed steps on how to appeal the decision. If patients aren't getting a transparent explanation on why they were denied, it's going to lead to confusion and distrust. So this is a very important part of improving all of these different processes. Transparency builds trust with patients and providers and reduces the confusion that often accompanies vague or technical denial language. When people understand why a decision was made and what they can do about it, it empowers them. A lot of healthcare companies and insurance companies, they have their own lingo that most patients don't understand unless they have taken some sort of medical terminology or medical literacy class. It's just the more transparent you can be, the better this is going to be for everyone involved. Also, from a deontological standpoint, this respects the patient's right to informed consent, and this also honors their autonomy. And from a utilitarian view, it prevents harm by reducing frustration, improving communication, and ultimately increasing the likelihood of timely access to care, which is a very important part of being a patient. Okay, so for recommendation number 3, and the final recommendation, it's about establishing routine AI auditing and bias detection. AI systems must be subject to independent third-party audits that evaluate their accuracy, fairness, and potential for discriminatory patterns. In some of the investigations, they found that some of the AI algorithms were biased towards specific demographics of people, which obviously is unethical. And auditing also helps to prevent harm before it occurs, ensuring that the technology evolves with ethical and legal standards in mind. And when we identify and correct these patterns of bias early, will increase accountability and strengthen the integrity of healthcare decisions. This particular recommendation serves a utilitarian purpose by protecting large populations from systemic errors, and a deontological one by honoring the moral obligation to provide equitable care to all. In doing so, it ensures that AI tools become part of an ethical and accountable healthcare ecosystem. So here we are at the conclusion and the summary. To kind of go over this again, United Healthcare's use of AI for claim denials and rehab services raised major ethical concerns around patient harm, transparency, and fairness. To kind of go over the ethical analysis again, we applied utilitarianism, which revealed harm to patients' well-being, while deontology emphasized the violation of patients' rights and provider duties. The corrective action that we went over was that a human review process and ethical oversight using the four-way method supports a fair and patient-centered resolution. And the core insight is that ethical leadership must guide the integration of emerging technologies in healthcare, ensuring that it does not replace human judgment, but is used as a helpful tool that can further stand up for patient dignity. In summary, United Healthcare's use of AI to deny care violated both the consequentialist and duty-based ethical standards. The four-way method revealed gaps in truthfulness, fairness, and responsibility. A corrective path forward includes transparency, oversight, and a reinvestment in ethical leadership. Ultimately, this case taught us that technology cannot replace human judgment, especially in life-impacting decisions. Thank you so much for your time.